Assalamu alaikum. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'du fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wa'budullaha wa la tushriku bihi shay'an wa bil walidayni ihsana wa bizil qurba واليتامى والمساكين والجار ذي القربى والجار الجنب والصاحب بالجنب وابن السبيل وما ملكت أيمانكم إن الله لا يحب من كان مختالا فخورا. The translation is, and worship Allah and associate not with him, and show kindness to parents, and to the kindred, and orphans, and the needy, and to the neighbor, that is a kinsman, and the neighbor that is a stranger, and the companion by your side, and the wayfarer, and those whom your right hand possess. Surely Allah loves not the proud and the boastful. So first of all, I want to thank the organization of this conference for allowing me to speak. My background is I am the Director for Disaster Relief for Humanity First International, along with the Vice President of Disaster Relief for Humanity First USA. And I've been involved with Humanity First in the US since its inception, but before that, since 1996, while I was in UK. So I was going to talk about a brief history of Humanity First in the last 20 years, as I know it, maybe share some anecdotes. I was also going to talk about how does medical versus general disaster relief correlate, and what help do we give? And then in the end, I'm going to ask you, as members of AMMA and Muslim Scientists Association and the Ladies Association and the IAAE, how can you help? What can you do? What more can you do to further the cause of Humanity First? So I'm going to start with a brief history. And right here, the first doctor who ever went for Humanity First USA is sitting right on the table, Dr. Sohail Hussain. He led a team of two other doctors, Dr. Irfan Al-Adin and Dr. Manzoor Sikdar, and set up the first disaster relief medical camp during Indonesian tsunami in Aceh, and spent 2 weeks. And I remember in the process, he also injured his ankle, or he came back on a wheelchair, which was very worrying. But that's how we started. And the second disaster that we managed in a big way was Hurricane Katrina. And the hero for that was Dr. Faizan Abdullah, who's now the chairman or president of AMA in USA. So we started from there, and both of their stories are amazing. One of the things that Dr. Sohail Hussain and his team did is, while they were providing care, they identified that people in Indonesia, who were all these refugees who had been moved and displaced from their houses, developed chelosis, or changes in the skin on the face. And one of the doctors had the courage to say, this is a vitamin deficiency, because all they were eating was fish and rice, and there was no vegetables. And they introduced vegetables. Within 3 days, those rashes went away. So that's a miracle that we saw. Dr. Faizan Abdullah, we were just 2 years in registration when Hurricane Katrina happened. We didn't know what we could do. We were so new. And Faizan went to the main headquarters in Baton Rouge, and basically he was getting, okay, you want to work? We'll give you a camp. We had a camp of 2,000 displaced people in a town called Gonzales. Hey, you can work with Red Cross. And guess what? That was our first foray into working in the United States. We got approval for licensing for all physicians, and alhamdulillah, we were able to provide that service. And I remember one incident. There was a time after 4 weeks when we said, we can't do this anymore. We were run out of resources, running out of money. And God knows that in the night, we got a big container of supplies left in the front of our door in Gonzales, Louisiana. Say, continue the work. And alhamdulillah, Dr. Zahid Mia Saab, who's in charge on that week for that camp, was able to continue the work for another 2 weeks because somebody donated us supplies. We still don't know who did it. So as we focus more on medical, I just have these pictures from just the last 1 year. We worked in Burkina Faso, Japan, earthquake. Burkina Faso is the displaced people from in Dori that have been displaced from the recent attacks. And alhamdulillah, with the help of Khudam al-Ahmadiyya, and we are able to provide housing, food, and we set up a medical clinic there, which is providing their immediate medical needs as well. They didn't have that before. So we're doing work in Tanzania this year, Sudan, Morocco, Syria, Gaza, of course, I'll talk more about it at some point, Turkey, and Jamaica. So when we talk about disaster relief, if you're talking about a medical perspective or any perspective, you want to make sure you do mitigation, prevent a disaster from happening. That's almost like tying the knot, let the camel be tied. The next one is to prepare, be ready. And as part of Humanity First, we've been trying to do a medical course to prepare doctors for readiness. And in the end, I'm going to come back to this preparedness a little bit, and I'm asking AMMA and IAAA's help. Then we do a response. Usually immediately response needs food, water, shelter, medical, psychological support. And then finally, once the immediate help is done, then we do what is called recovery or restoration. The medical response in an emergency is almost similar to what we have when we do BLS. You check before you're entering, you check the environment, make sure. So whenever you're going in as a doctor, you want to make sure, is there an exit strategy? If you're going to go in, are you going to be able to come out? And then you call for additional help. Remember that BLS, you have the phone, get the 911, you get help, and then you go in. And then thirdly, you immediately, as a medical person, you will provide basic first aid sometimes, stop bleeding, CPR. And then the goal of this basic help is you want to preserve life, you want to prevent deterioration, and you want to promote recovery. So, many of us who are sitting here have gone to disasters with Humanity First. And basically, in the first 72 hours after a disaster, you see acute injuries, you see fractures, you see injuries, trauma more so. And I don't know if Dr. Kaleem Malik, I think he's going to be here at some point. He is the perfect person because he goes in as an emergency medicine doctor, and he helps with that piece. But then what happens after day 4 to day 28 is you see worsening of chronic medical conditions. Diabetic cannot take their medicines. Hypertensive are out of their medicines. You see infections rising, many times skin infections. I think Dr. Hassan Shah is here. When he went to Turkey, he saw scabies and some of the skin infections that were getting worse in those camps. Lack of nutrition and hydration, I already mentioned. And the most vulnerable people are children and elderly women. So when I was in Poland at the border between Ukraine and Poland, the people that were coming out, that were leaving Ukraine, were all of them were 99% women and children. And they were out of their medicines, they were out of their, and they were having increased psychological needs, emotional challenges. They would cross the border and start crying. And they couldn't speak the language, and it was such a painful thing to see. But just talking to them kind of comforted them, and that's some of the things that you see when you go there. What limits you when you're going in and Dr. Sancha can mention it, when we enter Turkey, do we have enough medicines to give to people? Do we have the right medicines to give them? And then other supplies that go with it. Particularly, I see the weakest link is always the supplies that are needed for women. We don't always have them because everybody's thinking about everything else except that. So now we have a priority within Humanity First to make sure that we have the milk, we have the things that we need for children and moms so that they can provide immediate care. And then logistics of the team as well, like how do you get them there? Where do you make them stay? How do you get them out? That is always challenging. And what I've also noticed is getting things into a country during disaster is very, very hard. So the help varies. Our most recent help in the United States was in the big fire that happened in Hawaii. And after, believe it or not, after Gonzales, Louisiana, almost about 20 years later, first time we were able to give medical help with physicians going there was Hawaii. In between all the disasters that have happened, we didn't need medical help. The big one in New York City, again, the medical side was covered, except we had to provide food and logistics to people who were displaced. Cleaning up has been the big work that we do in the United States. And some of you who are here from Florida have been involved with that work. I think I want to mention Saqib. When he went to Turkey, I think one of the things that he brought was help with pain. Like that was such a big, aspect of their care, and he was able to, provide that help. Oops. So my slides are stuck, I think. Oh, there we go. So I'm just going to, how much time do I have? 5 minutes, okay. So I'm going to share a few more anecdotes. So in this work that we do, the reason what brings us to do it work, many times I hear, I'm a US doctor, what am I going to do there in a third world place? You should send somebody else and I'll pay for it. That's not, that may be an aspect of it in some cases. But we are kuntum khaira ummatin ukhrijat linnas. Each one of us is responsible, whether we live in the US or whether we live in Pakistan. We have the same responsibility, as I mentioned the verses of the Holy Quran. The neighbor that you know, yes, you want to help that person. The people in Gaza, yes, you want to help those people. But there are people in Tanzania, there are people in Sudan that you don't know as well. But you have a responsibility to help them as well. And that's what the verse of the Holy Quran that I recited in the beginning, helps us make sure we do it. The ask is, an AMMA has a representative or a doctor or a nurse in every Jamaat almost, I would say. I would say 99% of the Jamaat has one doctor. So my ask is, Hazur has been guiding us to make sure you plan for disaster. We have to plan for disaster in our backyard. And what I'm asking from the members of AMMA is get yourself trained on basic first aid. Some of you may be an oncologist or a radiologist or a geriatrician, but you should be able to know, how do I fix a bone? How do I stop bleeding? How do I manage that? And each one of us, and we will provide you the forum with the help of Khudaam Al-Anbiya, where we train the doctors in each chapter, where you then become that resource that we need. We're not asking you to go anywhere. We're not asking you to go any place in the world. AMMA might ask you separately, but what I'm asking is, we need your help so that you're ready for when a big disaster happens. You can't get people from California to come to New Jersey if they're displaced, if there's a disaster. You have to prepare the people in California. How do you manage for that disaster and respond to it within that vicinity? One of the big other challenges is that we have scientists here and IEEE here, and the ask is, the biggest challenge what is the biggest challenge now in Gaza? Getting them water. $600, we're going to buy the meal package, $600. That $600 provides 350 families with water every day. So that's the amount of help that we're doing today, now. But what's the challenge? Because we had to bring water from outside, sometimes from the West Bank, sometimes from Israel. And what we don't know, how do we set up a temporary desalination? How do we get the water from the ocean to become where we can drink it and use it? That's our challenge. And 2 years ago, Humanity First had set up one water well in Gaza. And by the grace of Allah, it kept working despite all the bombardments till the very end. Recently, there's been some challenges with it. But if IEEE can figure out and work on it and make it a priority, how do we help with desalination? The second area that happens is after disaster, and we had members from Morocco, when we had the Morocco disaster, the earthquake recently, the IEEE members got active, and there were some students who were doing a project. How do we build shelters cheaply? That becomes a challenge, another challenge. In Turkey, we were able to provide one shelter for one family, $5,000. But you just multiply 5,000 over 1,000 families, that's like a huge amount of money. Sometimes we don't have it. So what can IEEE do to help us with that? And the third area is to focus on how can we provide women and children during disaster. And I was looking for help from our Lajna members and our women members. to see if they can step up in the United States, help us prepare each of those 50 chapters, a plan for women and children during disaster. So in the end, the thing is that the DR team, the disaster relief team of Humanity First, can't work alone. It has to work, the fact that we have Khalifatul al-Masih's prayers behind us and guidance behind us, but all of these auxiliaries, if we work together, we can literally make a difference. And we have made a difference. And I'm so glad that Dr. Sohail and Dr. Fizan Abdullah had the courtesy and to ask me to come and talk about this. Because my job is to motivate you to how can we come together, what can we do better, and what can we do differently. We're not perfect. We have so many limitations when we go into the field, but we learn from each disaster, and we will be better with your help. I put my email there. I'd love to hear back from you. Thank you very much.